Good afternoon to all the Daily Voice viewers. My name is Dr. Rapiti, and I look forward to chatting to you today about the coronavirus. A little bit about me. I am a family practitioner in Mitchell's Plain for the last 37 years. I do a variety of things. One of my major interests has been addiction, and I'm the author of the book 4 Steps to Healing. Today I'm going to talk to you about the coronavirus because I feel it is important that the public out there get a better and clearer picture of this virus. I've been listening to experts like you have. I've read a lot about it, and I found that they all kind of let me down because they were very complicated. They gave us statistics. They left us all confused. And I found in my practice that many of the patients became very anxious and they seem to be very ignorant about what's going on. So today I'd like to give you a presentation that's going to be simple, easy to understand, and give you a clearer picture so you can cope with this condition. Now, why is corona such a serious condition? Why should we be worried? Why did we have the lockdowns? Well, in a word, this is a killer virus. Why is it a killer virus? For two reasons. First, or a couple of reasons. The first one is that it multiplies like no other virus known to man. Number two, it spreads so fast that you can imagine that the whole world has got it. The other issues about this virus that are of concern to you and to me and to the whole world is that we have no cure for it. We have no drug to treat this virus. And there's no drug, and it's a virus that's not known to man. And we know a lot about this virus, but equally so, there's a lot we don't know about it, and that's the worrying factor. But nevertheless, I'm sure there's a lot we're going to learn. Each day, new information is coming out about this virus. So before I go on into talking to you about the virus, I want to give you a little bit of the history of this virus. This is a SARS virus. SARS stands for Serious Acute Respiratory Stress Syndrome. What that means is that people stop breathing or find great difficulty breathing. It started in 2002 as the Ebola virus. As you can see, it started with a bat, and then it went transferred to a cat type of animal, and it became a zoonotic, and from there it transferred to the human being. And then we had about 800 deaths, so it's about 10%. Then in 2012, we added the Middle Eastern SARS virus, and it's the same COVID type. It's part of that SARS type virus. Again from the bat, went to the camel, and again infected human beings. And there too was not about 10 to 20,000, but the death rate was about 10%. Now in 2019, again from the bat, it went to the pangolin. The pangolin is an animal where it is highly sought after because they think the scales have got medicinal properties. But nonetheless, that seems to have transferred it to human beings. And in 2019, you can see in these two viruses, it was confined to the area. We controlled it. But in this case, it went worldwide, and in no time, the whole world has been affected by this virus. Now, what is so peculiar, so different? Well, I'm going to make a comparison between the coronavirus and the flu virus. If you look at this as the flu virus over here, and let's imagine that's the shape over there, those little things. That's how it looks. The flu virus looks consistent. It looks the same shape. But the coronavirus, you'll find that it morphs into different shapes. It's looking... So what scientists are finding difficult to do when they try and develop a vaccine, if you make a vaccine for this particular shape, you'll find that in no time the virus has morphed into this. So this vaccine is ineffective. So that's the challenge. That's the puzzle. That's why we can't find the vaccine, and it takes a good 12 months. If anything that's going to save us or protect us would be a good vaccine, and that's in about 12 to 18 months. Now, the second point about this virus is its rate of transmissibility. What I mean by that is, for example, how long does it take, or how many people can a virus affect? Now, if you compare this with the flu virus, now let's go back to our picture. You see, there's the flu virus. One person gets it, and he passes it to another, and to another, and one, and one. Now, but with the coronavirus, each person that gets infected sends it to 3 people. These 3 people will send it to another 3. Now, I want you to look at this figure. When the flu virus passes it to 10 people, in that time, the coronavirus has passed it on to 177,000 people. So you can see the vast difference between the 2 viruses. And if we do not do the quarantine, we do not do the isolation, the whole world would be affected by this virus. And the only way we can limit the spread, save the human population by stopping the spread, and one of the ways is the quarantine, the isolation, and the 2 months of lockdown. Understand, the lockdown cost us a lot. One moment, if we didn't have this lockdown, probably a big number of our population would have died or succumbed to this virus. There wouldn't have been enough people to bring up this economy. Nonetheless, we need to revive the economy. Now, what makes this virus particularly so dangerous? And I'm going to explain to you, with the symptoms. Firstly, when we talk of symptoms, it has got a range of symptoms that mimics all the symptoms of other flus. You could have a gastric flu and your chest flus, and we're all familiar with these types of flus. These pass off in about 3 or 4 days and you get better. With the coronavirus, you could have the virus in you and have no symptoms, and that's what makes it so dangerous. That is why if you look at somebody that's looking well, hale and hearty, don't for one moment think you can touch this person, you can hug this person, because he might or she might be harboring the virus and they can transmit it to you. In a nutshell, just imagine that everybody that you see them as having the coronavirus and keep your distance from them. That is very important. The second thing is, the symptoms of the coronavirus vary. You can get a cold, a scratchy throat, a slight cough, myalgic pains, running tummy, nausea. These are the mildest symptoms. Then you get to the more serious symptoms where it affects the chest. And when it affects the chest, that's when you can't breathe. And that's the dangerous one. So I want the viewers to understand, if you've got the mildest symptoms, generally you're okay. But if you get the one that affects the lungs, that's serious, it's life-threatening. So I want to explain to you the routes by which the virus can be transmitted. And we'll take you to this picture, and it can go through the eyes, through the nose, or through the mouth. And the way it happens is it gets through by droplet infection. And that is when people cough and they sneeze. And let's explain this to you. When they cough and sneeze, it is predicted that a cough droplet can travel as much as 2 meters, and that is why we insist on a 2-meter distance. Now, asthmatics should also be careful because they cough a lot, and anybody who coughs, cover your mouth with a mask and avoid coughing. Now, what we're going to do is now I'll explain to you why we need to treat this virus seriously. Now, we're going to move up onto this. The virus tracks in, it gets into the lungs, and it ends up in the alveoli. This is what we call the air sacs, where the air exchange takes place. Now, I'm going to explain to you in a little schematic diagram what my receptionist is showing you some of my lovely pictures, just to break the monotony, but after that we'll take you. Now, we're going to look at remember the air sac that I spoke to you about? Well, this is one of them. Here's this coronavirus. It goes in. Now, you'll find there are 2 types of cells. There's a red and there's a green cell. Now, the red cell has a function to keep this alveoli, this air sac, like a balloon open. When this virus attacks it, it multiplies and destroys these cells. And then look at what happens. From being open, it's all crushed. When it's crushed, No air can go in. So when no air goes in, what happens is you become hypoxic, you can't breathe, you can collapse, and you can die. You need to go quickly for treatment for oxygen. Remember, we have no treatment for that. The second thing that can happen is that same virus can affect the other cell, and that is a cell where the oxygen takes oxygen transfer and the gases transfer takes place. Now, when this cell gets damaged, what happens is that you can now get an infection, you can get no oxygen transfer, your body is now short of oxygen, then the air cells and the lungs becomes diseased. You can get a pneumonia. The next thing that now happens is, when it's damaged, it now goes into these capillaries. These are the blood vessels around the air sacs. These have now been damaged. Now it's damaging the capillaries. When it damages the capillaries, this is what happens. There are three things that happen. In this part here, the capillaries are damaged. It starts leaking fluid, and it fills the lungs with fluid, and the blood pressure drops because there's less volume. And when your blood pressure drops, you can die because of low blood pressure. The second thing that can happen is that it can cause infections to spread throughout your body. If it goes to the brain, you can get a meningitis. And the third serious thing is the blood clots. The blood clots are tiny clots. Tiny clots. Now we're going to show you back. There's an example of a blood vessel. This virus is so peculiar. It's the only virus that can form clots both in the veins and in the arteries. So here's an example of a blood vessel. You can see it's the clot here. Now, wherever there's a blood supply, if it goes to the brain, you can end up with fits, you can end up with meningitis, you could end up with a stroke. If it ends up in the heart, if it blocks the arteries of the heart, you can get a heart attack, and this is your heart over here. And you can get a heart attack. And then if it affects the kidneys, your kidneys can fail, you can end up with kidney failure, and you get bloated, and you can die of a coma. It can affect the lungs, the liver, and you can end up with liver failure. And if you get clots going to the legs, the arteries and vessels of the legs and the hands, you can get gangrene of the legs. And finally, if you get it in the lungs, you get an infarct and damage of the lungs. So you can see that it's a pretty serious illness. And if you get this condition, I'm afraid we don't have enough ventilators, and I'm not so sure that the ventilators can help you when this really happens. There's another thing that happens that people are not aware of, is that when you get this overwhelming infection, what the body does, it responds with high doses of antibodies. And these antibodies are so much that it ends up destroying the body. It's called the Cytokine Storm, and that's a dangerous situation. It's like you're calling the army, you got one small outbreak, and you bring the whole US Army, and you can imagine what they do with all they're destroying everything. So that's the second challenge. So in terms of the drugs, we have really no drugs. There's the hydroxyquinolone, and that's not really proven. The remdesivir, these are drugs. They're all in their trial stages, but none of them, up to this moment, we have nothing. So what do we do in this situation? We need to be very careful about killing the virus on the outside. If we don't kill the virus on the outside, it's going to kill us on the inside. So what do we need to do? We need to take protective measures. We need to do hand washing and hand sanitizing. That's important. Now, hand sanitizing, there's two things we need to do with the hand sanitizing, and that is we can use the spray, alcohol spray. It's got to be more than 60% or 70%, or soap water. Soap water, why soap water? Because the virus is a fat molecule. And a fat molecule, as you know, is easily killed, or like it's the fat in your kitchen on your plate. You use soap, and soap is probably the best. Now, what I would recommend is we don't all have running water. In the informal settlements, this is a problem. People don't have soap. So I've come up with a novel method which I implement because I really don't have the time to go every 20 minutes to a tap, wash my hands, get some soap, and in this winter, who's going to do that? We don't always. Now here's my simple solution, and Nat is going to point it out to you. This is a little ice cream bucket. It's got soap, it's got water, and in there you put 2 tablespoons of ordinary washing powder. And you put your hands into there and you wash for 20 seconds. And when you wash for 20 seconds, how do you count 20 seconds? It can be a schlep every time you go to the basin and wash it. So all you do is, you just sing the song like, I'm a jolly good fellow, I'm a jolly good fellow. By the end of the time you sang that song for 20 seconds, you've washed your hands, you can keep the water there. The other thing you could do is you could take that water, warm it up in the microwave in this winter months. You can get your children, put it in the kitchen, and so you got your water supply. You can imagine in the informal sector, in people living in shacks where there isn't easy running water, here's your easy solution. And it's practical, it's economical. The next morning what you can do is you can use that same water to wash the surfaces. That is what I do. I wash the surfaces of my tables, the handles. I protect my family. So here's one simple method. The other thing you can use is the masks. Of course, everybody should wear a mask. You should keep 20 distance away. With regards to hand washing, why we do it every 20 minutes, a study has been done where it has been found that we touch our faces over about 23 times a minute. So try and desist from this habit of touching your hands, whatever you do, because we are always doing things like this, touching door handles, touching the seats, and the virus can stay on these surfaces for between 3 to 24 hours. One Italian study claims that the virus, they found particles of it in a mask for almost 3 to 4 days. So one should wash your masks regularly. So that in a nutshell tells you what you should be doing. Keep your distances and try and isolate. Now, who are the people who are most at risk? The elderly, the people with chronic illnesses, the obese, the people with hypertension, people with diabetes, people that are immunocompromised with HIV and tuberculosis. There's another group of people that we seem to neglect in this country. Nobody talks about them. And those are the addicts. These are the people who care less about hygiene, they care less about masks, their nutritional level is low, they just sleep out in the cold, and they are at risk. The other group of people I'd like to mention, and that is the people with asthma, because this is a time when the flu season will come up. They're going to get symptoms of asthma, or they may not get symptoms of asthma, but they would cough at night, and this could spread. If they are positive and they are unaware of it, they could be spreading the virus. I would urge you, please, for heaven's sake, if you're an asthmatic, it won't do any harm. Use your preventer pump. And I'll show you, there are 2 preventer pumps. These are one of them. This is a brown pump. It's a steroid pump. Even if you don't have the cough, use it. You'll be doing people a favor. Now, with the coronavirus, we think if you're positive, you should isolate for 14 days, because that's about the period of time in which we think the virus will be out of your system. Now, what is the best, how are we going to know whether you have an ordinary flu or the corona flu? We can't tell just by your symptoms. Like I said, all of them have the same symptoms. So the only way is the throat swab test, the COVID test. There again, there is a problem. If you come negative, it doesn't necessarily, you could be negative. You could be negative because it's a false negative. The sampling could be wrong. The other thing is, you could be negative because it was taken in the wrong phase. You could be having symptoms now, and you had the test, and it's negative, but the test might test positive a little later. So there's no way of saying when you are safe, when you're not safe. The other thing is that, and I want you to take note of this very carefully, please. Don't think if you tested positive, you're isolated, you're immune, because there's no way of saying that if you have the coronavirus and you're over the infection, that you are immune. As I've said before, this virus tends to mutate. There's a possibility that you can get reinfected. Therefore, in the next year or two, I want all of us to practice distancing, hygiene, and isolation. I'm not saying don't communicate, but isolate. In my practice, I'm very particular. Life has changed for a lot of people. I know it's not the same. I used to have lots of people in my waiting room. I no longer do that. Everything is by appointments. I only allow one person and an escort. No more than that, only by appointments. I know people find it difficult, but please understand, if a doctor is taking an appointment, he's a good doctor, he's acting responsibly, because we don't want our staff to be infected, neither do we want to get infected. Remember, we are fighting a different war. So I hope I've given you a good understanding of it. Now I'm sure the question will be, will we all die of the coronavirus? No, I don't think so. The difference, if I show you in this earlier picture, where these viruses, these two, the death rates was 10%. The good thing with the coronavirus, lots of people will be infected, but only 3.5% will die. So it doesn't matter if you get positive. It doesn't mean you're going to die. Now the question is, who is going to die? It can affect anybody. Don't for one moment think, I'm a healthy bodybuilder, I'm a fit guy, I won't get it. It depends where this virus gets you. If it gets you in the lungs and affects you badly, you can be the strongest, toughest person, you will succumb to it. So don't take this virus at liberty, don't be very liberal about it, and don't be casual about it. If I were you, I'd keep my distance, protect myself, and see see the whole world around with virus, and you'll be safe. I would like to encourage you not to feel despondent. I have a lot of patients who have come to me, bothering me on WhatsApp, fearing what's going to happen to me. Should you fear? Should you be anxious? No, it's not going to help you. You just don't be anxious, you don't be afraid, practice safe distancing, practice hygiene, but be cautious. Don't be blasé, don't go out without your mask, don't go shopping when you don't need to. If you can do online shopping, do it. But for your elderly people, I would urge you, please, if you've got younger children to do your shopping, go and do it. It doesn't necessarily mean you have diabetes, you have hypertension. Yes, you might be at risk, but if you take precautions, I don't see why you should be any more at risk than anybody else who doesn't take precautions. So, in all this, I'd like to say there are some positives that came out of this coronavirus. And for me personally, during the lockdown, I had lots of me time, I had family time. And secondly, I think I feel grateful. I'm in an era, I'm in a time, we all are in a time where we are fighting a war against a virus, not with guns, bombs and missiles, but with our minds, our heart, and with simple hygiene. And I believe, with simple things like the sanitizer, and if we all do our part, I'm sure we will win this war. And when we win it, we can proudly say we've been part of this war to conquer this virus. The governments throughout the world have done their bit by flattening the curve, bringing about some quarantine. Now the responsibility is for us to go back, build this economy, and in doing so, we need to be responsible. We can't expect government to do everything for us. Each one of us, if you're practicing safe distancing, hygiene, then you're doing your bit. So that is all you need to do. I'd like to leave you with this note. When the pessimists of the world are miserable, looking at all the negatives, the optimists are taking things in their stride and looking at the positives. I believe We are going to overcome this virus. We must not be despondent. We must look positive. Have some fun. Be confident about what's happening. Not everybody's going to die. No, not everybody's going to die. If you have a slight flu, treat it as though you got the coronavirus and go and isolate and go back to work and just practice safe distancing. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope I've elucidated pretty clearly for you. It was not my intention to make you afraid, but to educate you to act responsibly. And I'd like to thank the Daily Voice for inviting me on their platform. And I'd like you to go out, buy the Daily Voice tomorrow. You know, the newspaper that brings you the news, the giggles, and all the news that you need to know about the townships that the mainstream newspapers do not get you. And if you need to know anything about me or wish to know, get more information about the virus or whatever, you can contact me on my Facebook page at EV Rapiti. You can WhatsApp me on 081-846, or you can email me at robertrapiti@gmail.com, or you can go to my website. I'll be glad to take your calls, interact with you, and help you. And I'm pretty confident. You know, I just like to tell you that I according to the profession, I'm not supposed to be at work. Well, quite frankly, I see myself as a foot soldier that needs to take on this challenge and fight this virus with my patients. So I'd rather die fighting than to die of being of boredom. So I want to wish you all well, stay healthy, and importantly, stay alive by practicing what I taught you. God bless.